Hub,
and Spoke. Audio Collective.
You're listening to Nocturne. I'm Vanessa Lowe.
Can I get you, would you be okay for me to take a picture of you in front of the board?
Sure.
I love
and
that.
some of these equations are kind of old, but yeah.
I love being in spaces like this. I'm never in spaces like this, like scientific. I can feel...
All my students' artwork for astronomy classes, like I'm so proud of them. I do clear out, not the back half.
I'm in a pleasantly cluttered office within the Department of Physics and Astronomy at the University of San Francisco. There are indecipherable equations written on a large whiteboard on one wall, beside a poster with Albert Einstein's face over some of his quotes about the power of imagination. It's the office of astronomer and cosmologist Dr. Aparna Venkatesan. Aparna has a ready smile and warm eyes. She listens closely and speaks carefully. She was also featured in another episode of Nocturne about the effort to preserve dark skies in Point Reyes in Northern California. That episode is called Noctalgia, which is the term that she and Dr. John Barentine coined, referring to grief over the loss of the night sky.
My name is Aparna Venkatesan. I'm a professor of physics and astronomy at the University of San Francisco. I am a cosmologist by training, but also work actively in cultural astronomy and space policy, and increasingly in dark sky advocacy.
Dr. Aparna Venkatesan's research includes studies of the first stars and quasars in the universe, the physical conditions in early universe galaxies, and something called cosmological element synthesis. Aparna was born and raised in Mumbai, India, a densely populated city that's currently home to over 20 million people. It wasn't quite that big when she lived there, but even still, there was enough ambient light to block a good view of the stars.
I lived in very congested Asian cities my whole life, so I didn't see the stars that much. It was really more available through planetaria shows and reading a lot of books in my childhood. Stephen Hawking's book, Brief History of Time, had just come out when I was around 10 years old. And every Sunday morning, there'd be a series of things I'd watch, and Carl Sagan's Cosmos was one of them.
Aparna was as young as 5 years old when she fell in love with math and how it related to space.
I think I'm one of those linear trajectory people who, from a young age, knew what they wanted and had the good fortune to actually be able to do it. I just really loved math and loved math as it manifested through the cosmos. I see math as truly the universal language, and I found math applied to the skies really beautiful, and just really loved the human attempt to understand their origin in the stars and also their future in the stars.
Despite her deep connection to the stars, Aparna's first true clear view of them wouldn't take place until she left India at 17 to study astronomy at Cornell University. In her sophomore year, she saw the movie Thelma and Louise, in which two women drive through Utah on an adventure.
And being like, I want to go there. And I have to tell you, the first time in Utah that I saw those desert skies, wow, it was unbelievable. Really just lifted me out of myself.
It lifted her out of herself, and for the first time, her fascination with the language of the cosmos was merged with her actual physical experience of it.
Things exist in your mind so often, either before or in parallel with your experience of them. But I think the experience of the sky is so deeply humanizing. It's not just a cerebral relationship to the sky, but there's something very deeply human about it.
This idea of the human element to the cosmos took me a bit by surprise, because when I look up at the stars, I tend to feel really small and insignificant. For Aparna, it's that human element that helps her connect to space more deeply than through just the lens of science.
And I think it's possible to look up at the skies and to really appreciate truly how ancient we are, We are ancient, right? I just giggle when people ask me how old I am. I'm like, we're all 14 billion years old, right? And we've been together from the start. So sure, this fleeting arrangement of atoms is 52 years old. But really, we've been together from the start. So I think it's possible to look at the skies with the eyes of a scientist, but also a poet and storyteller and mystic. I know that many times science is seen as so lacking in the mystery and awe, but I would really push back against that. I think anyone who spends even a month on quantum physics, you have to be a philosopher to really come to terms with what nature's doing at the smallest scales. I don't know how to feel anything but awe and reverence for that.
For Aparna, that sense of reverence is also experienced in relation to the night sky down here on Earth, and the night in general.
For me, the night means cycles, rest, creativity, reconnection, and awe. Yeah.
Aparna poetically describes space, which we Earth dwellers perceive as the night sky, as the ocean above us, a part of nature that belongs to all of us. It's a precious part of our environment and connects us to a profound sense of awe. But unlike the ocean, there's no agreement about how to preserve and protect space.
To me, it's incredibly astonishing that space and the skies are not treated legally as an environment yet. There's growing movements towards that, both legally, ethically, practically, scientifically.
Aparna sees this lack of agreement about how to manage the use of space and its resources as a symptom of a binary way of thinking. Someone wins and someone loses, rather than seeing the interconnectivity of everything and working toward the benefit of all.
It's not science versus culture or humans versus the environment. We are part of the environment that we rely on to feed and nurture and house us. So I view the Earth sky and Earth space environment as a continuum. But we're really standing on the precipice of a new era of human presence in space, which is already accelerating month to month. And right now, and really for the past few years, the focus has been on orbital space. But we're quickly moving to the moon.
We'll get to the moon in a bit. But first, by orbital space activity, Aparna's talking about satellites, as well as commercial and military activity, space station, astronomy missions, and space junk. Activity around the Earth's orbit has increased at a dizzying rate in recent years, and a few loud and powerful voices in favor of innovation have plowed ahead with some not-so-great consequences, like pollution and wildlife impacts from rockets, satellite debris crashing down to Earth, and disruption of commercial air travel, to name just a few. And it's unclear who is responsible for dealing with those consequences.
We currently have a rotating and rapidly growing cage of hardware above us. And when things go wrong and the companies pull out, who's in charge of responsibly deorbiting all of that? And you've probably seen a lot of the headlines of debris falling back to Earth, falling onto a farm in Saskatchewan or hitting a home in Florida. And the first wave of lawsuits against NASA have begun. It's all unfolding very quickly, and that's a real concern. It's really the unchecked pace of this. One of the few things that didn't grind to a halt over the pandemic years was the launch of satellites. It continued unchecked. And now we're maybe at 10% of what's planned for up there. We're already running into a lot of issues, right? You can't avoid seeing, even with the unaided eye, swarms of satellites. I was up in Sonoma recently, and after dusk, satellites everywhere. I couldn't stop seeing them. And some satellites, next generation satellites, are getting brighter with time. That's the wrong way.
The right way, in Aparna's view, would be to launch a little, assess the impact, and course correct. But that's not how it's going. The sense of urgency has been largely around the stated goal of improving the speed, bandwidth, and availability of the internet to more people at affordable costs, something which Aparna says has not been fully delivered as promised.
I'm not sure, by the way, that we've yet reached the latency, the speed of internet, the bandwidth, and the affordable costs that were promised 5 years ago. So if that's the goal, I have not seen that achieved yet. In many countries, it's still several times the average local salary. That is something I'd like to see. But is this the only way to do it in destroying environments? And the destruction is not just in orbit, it's in the deorbiting phase too, polluting the atmosphere and oceans, and also at the launch sites. There was a huge New York Times article that spoke about this, the devastating impact on wildlife habitats just from SpaceX launches.
There are also a myriad of safety and security issues that don't get much attention.
So there's the actual physical security issues of we might be one collision away from an uncontrolled debris cascade, which will then create destruction of a lot of space-based and eventually ground-based assets. And colleagues of mine, such as Aaron Boley and others at the Outer Space Institute, have calculated that uncontrolled rocket reentries will disproportionately impact the global south with human casualty risk. So there's that kind of in-your-face security issues, not to mention with all the global wars going on, what happens when people steal SpaceX or Starlink or other assets on the ground. And then there are cybersecurity issues. What if people hack this flotilla of hardware and repurpose it to their own uses? I just think, in my mind, the CEOs of some of these companies have shown themselves to not always be interested in U.S. security interests or to be cooperative. They just do what they do. We are currently so reliant, a lot of what NASA and the government is doing, on these industry operators that it's really unclear to me how they're going to manage a lot of these security risks. I mean, the Pentagon has been handing huge contracts to SpaceX and Starlink. So I just don't know what the future holds. But do we have systems in place to address security and cybersecurity threats? I'm not sure. And just as a child who grew up in the 70s and 80s, I am floored that the worries of nuclear threats in space have returned. I'm floored by that, but it's real now.
So that's how things are going in orbital space. Let's get back to the moon.
We are now up to 5 countries that have successfully landed on the moon, and there's going to be many more private initiatives. And plans are well underway with many U.S., military, DARPA, and other initiatives for developing sustained presence on the moon, lunar bases, lunar regolith mining, and other activities.
Lunar regolith is basically the surface of the moon, the basins, the highlands, old lava flows.
So there's basically enormous numbers of plans underway, but there's still no global regulatory framework for how things are going to unfold on the moon. But the Outer Space Treaty's language, to the best of my understanding, is that countries should not interfere with other countries' interests in a space. And that's what's causing the rush to be the one to get there first. Because then if you get there and claim, let me just say, the most favorable aspects of some crater on the moon or some aspect of the lunar South Pole, which is where a lot of the frozen water ice, very needed if you want a real human or other base there, that's where people are rushing to get. So if you want to be there in a way where you don't get the worst real estate, you're trying to get there first so that then other countries' encroachment might be seen as interference. So I am not a treaty expert, and I'm certainly not a space policy or a space lawyer expert, but I am concerned. Again, the moon's been with us 4 billion years. What is the rush to get there?
Others are concerned as well. Anthropologists and geologists at the University of Kansas argue that a new geological era is underway, in which humans have become the dominant force shaping the moon's environment. They advocate for acknowledging this fact by declaring a new geological epoch for the moon, the Lunar Anthropocene. The researchers warn that without this recognition and appropriate study and preservation, human activity could cause massive and irreparable damage to the moon.
We are changing environments more quickly than they are adapted to respond. I worry that a thoughtless presence there will change permanently the kind of science we can do there in the future. Like, are we erasing certain geological or protobiological records from whatever billions of years ago? I have no idea. There's also real concerns about the biocontamination we would take there and how that will change what we find on the moon. There's also concerns about all this landing and taking off will kick up a lot of the lunar surface. This is very finely ground dust just from the polishing from all the micrometeorites that have been polishing the surface for years. So if we keep kicking up that dust along with all the exhaust gases of things that are landing and taking off, that's going to really change what kind of science we're able to do. And also the far side of the moon, which, as you know, is permanently turned away from the Earth, and so will avoid a lot of the electromagnetic and radio signals from Earth, is very quiet right now. So there's a lot of radio experiments listening for scientific signals, especially from the early universe, that are planned for there. And I'm personally, as a cosmologist, excited for that. But the moon will then no longer be a quiet place. So I'm not saying we should do this or that. I want to avoid binary thinking, but I just think as a species we need to evaluate. How are we going there? Why are we going there? And for what are we going there? And we might want to listen to the very early universe, but we might want to do it in a way that is ethical and sustainable and doesn't rule out future science programs and future opportunities.
What's happening right now at this moment is the opposite of what Aparna is proposing. The current political approach in the U.S., not surprisingly, focuses on deregulating space debris from rockets and satellites. In fact, federal research on pollution from these activities is poised to be killed. It's hard to imagine that preserving the moon will win out over more immediate interests.
I think it's just true that increasingly space initiatives are from private corporations, and even the US's and other government agencies' space programs like NASA is heavily reliant on industry and private operators to get to and from, say, the space station, or the whole Artemis series of missions to the moon is pretty heavily reliant on private operators. So I do really think private space actors are not just creating the rules as they go along, but they're almost shaping the landscape of where we're going in a way that neither the systems on Earth nor those environments can respond in a resilient way.
And while the obvious concerning issue to most is that of protecting and preserving the shared resource of space, to students of history, there's another unsettling aspect to this race to stake a claim on space and the moon. The term to describe it is astrocolonialism.
The term astrocolonialism, to the best of my knowledge, was first amplified by Becky Ferreira, a science writer who writes frequently for all the major publications. But that idea had been building for years in this unchecked expansionism to space. And like all colonization, it had powerful rhetoric. It did not hesitate to invoke the idea of a manifest destiny in the stars. It did not hesitate to invoke cowboy metaphors at the launch pad. So many, I'll just say, space company CEOs wore cowboy hats to the launch pad. I mean, space is literally couched in language of the Wild West, right? Like the frontier of space. But that has been a very painful journey for many peoples, and also for the environment itself. The painful history of mining on Earth and the impact on environments and peoples, including indigenous peoples, is very much at the front of my mind.
While, as far as we know, this expansion into space and the moon will not be displacing indigenous beings, with all the violence and loss that entails, there are other ways that this spirit of astrocolonialism threatens to run roughshod over those less powerful, like prioritizing the profit of the dominant culture over other cultures' beliefs and traditions.
Many of our Indigenous colleagues shared in some of our conferences and reports we wrote up with their consent that when satellites pass between them and stars that they're in ceremony with, they feel a literal interruption of ceremony. And that when they feel the sky is being erased, the sky is origin story, the sky is language, the sky is identity. So there's an erasure of traditions, sky traditions and identity again. So this colonization of space is a painful repeating of colonization of Earth history for many communities, including Indigenous communities. An erasure of identity, of traditions, and in ways that are still unfolding. I've heard industry experts say things like, why do you care if we're dumping ashes in these environments? They are dead anyway. So there's this assumption of nothing and no one is there to displace. I'm not claiming there's life on Mars or the moon. I mean, I don't know that yet, but I don't think there is yet. But who knows what science will reveal as it digs of past evidence. I'll point to a very beautiful and impactful worldview piece in Nature by Alvin Harvey, a Dene Navajo PhD student at MIT in aeronautics and astronautics. He just successfully defended his thesis, calling for a halt to exporting human remains to the moon. And his words in that one-pager were so beautiful, that the moon is a relative, that it is a relation, that the export of ashes is like desecrating the home of a relative. It is disrespectful. It's seen as an act of cultural desecration. And the Navajo tribe and their chairman of their tribe wrote a long statement after the planned astrobotic mission, which was carrying almost 70 cremated remains, mostly of humans, but there was one pet remains, to the moon. That mission ended up not getting to the moon. But this is billed as, kind of live forever in space. But there was a lot of attention, and the Navajo Nation statement was then signed by a coalition of large tribes, the largest organization of land tribes, saying that looking upon the dead is disrespectful, do not dump ashes there. To me, this is, one of many Indigenous worldviews, but also many global cultural worldviews. In my own tradition, it is disrespectful to look upon the dead. When we dissolve ashes, we walk away, not looking back. We dissolve them in the ocean.
Then there's the issue of leaving poop on the moon.
Yeah. Desecration, I don't understand it. I know that it's a big challenge, even in sacred environments here on Earth, like Everest, sacred to the Tibetans. Trash and bags of poop and, tourism debris is a challenge there as well. So there's going to be this kind of literal detritus of human presence. What's our plan for all that?
To be clear, while Aparna is not in favor of leaving poop and human remains on the moon, she's also not against signs of human activity.
A topic that I think is very much where the field's going to go to is just broadening definitions of heritage, right? I am glad it includes landing sites and astronaut boot prints where we place the flag. But it should broaden to more things than that, because whose heritage are we talking about? Who defines that heritage? Then that's my question. The heritage of whom, and who gets to define that? Because I think by our actions, we show who our ancestors are. And so, the human species, I don't know how long we'll be around, but for future spacefaring species that might visit the solar system, what evidence do we want to leave them of what our value systems were? Because for me, leaving such detritus, is that really the way to go? I mean, no national park will allow the dumping of remains or bags of poop or random art installations. So if we can't do it here, why are we doing it there?
If we narrow the lens a bit, it's not hard to see how these larger cultural issues can affect individuals very personally, as they have for Aparna.
So my father, who was my lifelong champion and bestie, passed in the first week of the pandemic at new moon. And because all the borders closed and the world shut down, I couldn't get back home to retrieve his ashes for over a year. It was awful. The same week, I was in a really bad accident in San Francisco, and I didn't walk for a lot of the rest of the year. So when the pandemic started and we all got locked up at home and I was at home with my 2 teen sons, I had a lot of time to stew in my grief and in my pain over the loss of my father, but also the physical pain of my accident. And time acquired a kind of gray quality. There was a sameness to every day after months of being home. And in a way, the dark grace of that time is it really reconnected me as a timekeeper to the sky's cycles, because I was not able to keep time anymore with kitchen clocks and routines. There was just a sameness to the days as far as human routine. And seeing the cyclical nature of lengthening days, shortening days, but also the monthly cycles, seeing what constellations were available. Oh, there's that meteor shower. Oh, there's the moon. And for the Hindu Indian tradition, new moon is a time of ancestors. It's very sacred. And the first 13 moons after an ancestor passes, we do a monthly ritual. And so doing that monthly ritual for me with our family priest through, video call really reconnected me to those traditions and to honoring those monthly cycles. I will now remember my father every new moon. And even now, I know how many new moons have passed since my father passed, 53. And it has really connected me. The moon, which I really appreciate my knowledge of it from a planetary astronomer perspective, but now the moon has become unquantifiably precious for me because it is my grief calendar. It is my grief calendar. I often talk to it in my heart, like I would talk to my father. By reconnecting to a lot of my traditions, have reconnected to the views of it as a relative, as an ancestor too. So I don't know what to do with this, planned, unchecked expansionism to the moon. I don't know the scale of what will be built or how much will be visible with binoculars from the Earth. But for me, my perception, one individual of the moon, has changed since all these landings, since last summer. It feels different to know, and I'm still sorting that out for myself, but it feels different.
Aparna is a scientist. She's excited about exploring and learning everything that can be learned in space, but also taking in all perspectives and traditions as we move deeper and farther into this shared cosmic realm.
I'm not advocating for stopping. That's not going to happen anyway. But for greater ownership by regulatory agencies that this is something that's going to impact all of humanity. And that language is already being used, that it's for the betterment of humanity.
The language is being used, but Aparna wants them to mean it.
Yeah, bringing in the perspectives of all human ways of knowing, of science, of storytelling. Because the joy, the excitement, the potential of exploration and discovery is not a feature of just modern times or Western systems or the privilege of industry alone. They're not the only ones excited about setting forth, not really knowing what new horizons we'll find. It is a human quality. Human beings love exploring. They love setting sail or launching by land, foot, sea, air. It is a human quality. I think it's very important that astronomers advocate for humanity. And I would like to see the benefits flow back to actual problems on Earth. I know there's a lot of lofty rhetoric, becoming an interplanetary species or et cetera, but I would like to know how the benefits will flow back to those here who can't and won't be moving to Mars.
For all the work by Aparna and her colleagues advocating for smart and considerate choices about human exploration and exploitation of the cosmos, it's an uphill battle.
I think it's been complicated. It's been hard. We have written a lot, advocated a lot. Our teams have, through the American Astronomical Society and other groups, the International Astronomical Union and the Center for the Protection of the Skies, many teams of people are speaking to international and national agencies and regulatory bodies and advisory bodies. We do a ton of briefings. We give a lot of talks to the public. But progress is often slow and incremental. And again, the absence of a regulatory home and the difficulty of finding global consensus on anything is really challenging us, I would say, at present.
Given all these challenges, it can be hard to stay positive, even for someone as passionate and dedicated as Aparna.
So often, it's easy to feel you're just screaming into the wind and nothing's changing. One writes and speaks and speaks and writes, and then contracts get handed in the billions anyway to some of the leading actors in space that are rushing ahead. So I think developing achievable islands of joy like programs, dark sky parks, and involving the youth in what is their future and what is theirs to defend, so that there are narratives in addition to the storytelling and narratives by powerful voices with predetermined goals for these environments.
Aparna believes, and I agree, that there's hope in telling the story of our personal and ancestral connection to the cosmos. There's value and power in countering the other story, that space is there to be conquered and acquired, whatever the costs.
I understand this might take a while, but I think if we could land on a view that we are here for the long term rather than this short term, extractive and panicked mentality, then I think we'll land on the view of us belonging to environment rather than environment belonging to us. There's models for, how people sustainably manage environments that they are on a quest of discovery with. And one of them, for me, is acting like we're going to be here a long time. One of my personal goals is to grow people's sense of investment in the skies, personal investment, to see this as a story that is still unfolding and that is their story. I see this as a journey of reclamation of the ecology and environment of the skies, as a reclamation of the ecology of our human selves. So it's a reclamation of our wild and ancient selves. And I think by going out under the stars, by writing our own stories, it connects us to our shared ecology, our shared hope that we will continue to look upon what we've always looked upon, and that we want that for the future.
You've been listening to Nocturne. I'm Vanessa Lowe. Nocturne is produced by me and was created by myself and Kent Sparling, who also composed the theme music. You can find more information about Nocturne at our website, nocturnepodcast.org. I'll post a link for Dr. Aparna Venkatesan there in the show notes for this episode. She and Dr. John Barentine recently co-founded, along with others, the new Center for Space Environmentalism. Nocturne is a 100% independent labor of love. The only one who can cut our funding is you. Thank you to everyone who supports us on Patreon and PayPal. You keep this show going. If you're not supporting us yet, please go to nocturnepodcast.org/support to find out how. It'll make me really happy, and you'll get more episodes. Plus, if you support Nocturne on Patreon at $5 a month or more, there are 20 short bonus episodes that you get as a thank you. That's it for now. Till next time, thanks for listening, and be well.